Homeless and pregnant at 13, this girl's life was over. Until this woman changed everything. The two pink lines on the pregnancy test stared back at Sophia, unwavering and undeniable. Her hands trembled, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. 13 years old. Pregnant. The words echoed in her mind, a terrifying refrain that shattered the fragile remnants of her childhood. She sank to the bathroom floor, the cold tile a stark contrast to the burning shame that coursed through her veins. How could this have happened? She and Mark had been so careful ... or so she thought. One mistake, one moment of teenage recklessness, had irrevocably altered the course of her life. The initial shock gave way to a wave of fear, a cold dread that gripped her stomach. What would her parents say? How would she tell them? Her parents, strict and devout members of their small town's Baptist church, held traditional values. They had always emphasized abstinence, the sanctity of marriage, and the importance of maintaining a good reputation. Sophia knew, with a sickening certainty, that her pregnancy would be met with anything but understanding. She hid the pregnancy test deep in her backpack, burying it beneath textbooks and notebooks, as if she could somehow bury the truth itself. She tried to go about her day, attending school, doing her chores, pretending that everything was normal. But the secret gnawed at her, a constant weight on her chest. The nausea started a few weeks later, subtle at first, then increasingly debilitating. She couldn't keep anything down, her appetite vanished, and she grew pale and listless. Her mother, Sarah, noticed the change, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Sophia, are you feeling all right?" Sarah asked one evening, her voice sharp. "You've barely touched your dinner." Sophia forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a little tired." But Sarah wasn't fooled. She was a perceptive woman, and she knew her daughter. She pressed Sophia, her questions becoming more pointed, her gaze more intense. Finally, Sophia broke. The tears she had been holding back for weeks erupted, a torrent of fear, shame, and despair. She confessed everything, her voice trembling, her body shaking. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia couldn't bring herself to look at her parents, her gaze fixed on the floor. She waited for the explosion, the yelling, the accusations. Her father, Robert, a stern and imposing man, was the first to speak. His voice was low and controlled, but it held an undercurrent of barely suppressed rage. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word sounding like a curse. "How could you do this to us, Sophia? How could you be so irresponsible?" Her mother, Sarah, remained silent, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes, usually filled with warmth and love, were now cold and distant. The argument that followed was a blur of accusations, recriminations, and tears. Sophia pleaded for understanding, for forgiveness, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Her parents, blinded by their own shame and disappointment, saw only one solution. "You can't stay here, Sophia," her father said, his voice final. "You've brought disgrace upon this family. You've made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." Her mother, finally finding her voice, added, "We can't have you here, influencing your younger siblings. It's not right. It's not ... godly." Sophia was stunned. Kicked out? Where would she go? What would she do? She begged them to reconsider, to let her stay, to help her. But her parents were resolute. Their decision was made. "Pack your things," her father said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have until morning." Sophia, numb with shock and disbelief, retreated to her room. She packed a small bag, her hands shaking, her mind reeling. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. As she walked out of the house that had been her home for 13 years, she looked back, hoping for a sign of remorse, a change of heart. But her parents stood in the doorway, their faces cold and unforgiving. The door closed behind her, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. It was the sound of her childhood ending, of her life shattering into a million pieces. She was alone, pregnant, and homeless. The night air was cold, a biting wind whipping through the streets of Havenwood, a small, quiet town nestled in the heart of rural Pennsylvania. Sophia shivered, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her. She had nowhere to go, no plan, only a gnawing fear that threatened to consume her. She walked aimlessly, her feet carrying her through the familiar streets that now felt alien and hostile. The houses, once symbols of comfort and security, were now dark and forbidding, their windows like unseeing eyes. She passed the park where she used to play as a child, the swing swaying gently in the breeze, a ghostly reminder of happier times. She passed the school, the library, the ice cream shop where she and her friends used to hang out. Each familiar landmark was a painful reminder of the life she had lost. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to set in. Her legs ached, her feet were blistered, and her stomach growled with hunger. She found a small, secluded alcove behind a closed storefront, a meager shelter from the wind. She huddled in the corner, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to conserve warmth. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the day, the accusations, the rejection, the terrifying uncertainty of her future. The sounds of the night, the distant rumble of traffic, the rustling of leaves, the occasional howl of a dog, amplified her fear and loneliness. She felt utterly alone, abandoned, a tiny speck in a vast, uncaring world. She thought about the baby growing inside her, a tiny life dependent on her for survival. The thought brought a surge of fierce protectiveness, a determination to somehow, someway, provide for her child. But how? She had no money, no skills, no support. She was just a 13-year-old girl, alone and adrift in a world that seemed determined to crush her. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, Sophia realized the harsh reality of her situation. She was homeless. She had no food, no shelter, no one to turn to. She had to find a way to survive, not just for herself, but for her baby. She stood up, her legs stiff and sore. She brushed off her clothes, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. She had to be strong. She had to be brave. She started walking again, her eyes scanning the streets, searching for any sign of hope, any glimmer of kindness in a world that had suddenly turned cold and cruel. She passed a bakery, the warm, inviting aroma of fresh bread wafting out into the street. Her stomach growled, a painful reminder of her hunger. She hesitated, her pride warring with her desperation. Could she ask for help? Would they turn her away? Would they judge her, like everyone else? She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. She had to try. She had to do whatever it took to survive. She pushed open the bakery door, the bell above it jingling softly, announcing her arrival. The warmth of the bakery enveloped Sophia as she stepped inside, a welcome contrast to the chill morning air. The aroma of freshly baked bread, cinnamon rolls, and coffee filled her senses, making her stomach clench with hunger. A few customers were seated at tables, sipping coffee and chatting quietly. Behind the counter, a young man was arranging pastries in a display case. He glanced up, his expression neutral. Sophia hesitated, her courage faltering. She felt out of place, dirty and disheveled amidst the clean, cozy atmosphere of the bakery. She almost turned to leave, but the thought of her empty stomach, and the growing life inside her, spurred her on. She approached the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me," she said. Could I please have some water?" The young man looked at her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. He saw the dirt smudged on her clothes, the exhaustion in her eyes, the slight swell of her belly beneath her jacket. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure," he said, his voice noncommittal. He filled a paper cup with water and handed it to her. Sophia drank the water greedily, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. She thanked him, her voice still trembling. Do you have any day-old bread?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Something you're going to throw away?" I haven't eaten in a while." The young man's expression softened slightly. He looked at her again, his gaze more discerning this time. He saw the vulnerability, the desperation, but also a flicker of resilience. "Wait here," he said. He disappeared into the back room, returning a few moments later with a small bag. He handed it to Sophia. "It's just some rolls from yesterday," he said. "They're still good." Sophia's eyes welled with tears. It was a small act of kindness, but it meant the world to her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you so much." She found a quiet corner outside the bakery and devoured the rolls, savoring each bite. The food gave her a temporary boost of energy, but it also reminded her of how precarious her situation was. As she ate, she watched the people passing by, their lives seemingly untouched by the kind of hardship she was facing. She envied their normalcy, their security, their simple routines. She knew she couldn't stay in Havenwood. Her parents, the community, the constant reminders of her past, it was too much to bear. She had to leave, to find somewhere she could start over, somewhere she could build a new life for herself and her baby. But where could she go? She had no money, no connections, no resources. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, threatening to drown her. As she was contemplating her options, A group of teenagers approached her, their expressions hostile. They were older, bigger, and clearly looking for trouble. "Hey, look at the little mommy," one of them sneered. "Where's your baby daddy, huh?" Sophia tried to ignore them, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she was vulnerable, an easy target. "Leave her alone," a voice said from behind her. It was the young man from the bakery. He stood between Sophia and the teenagers, his body language protective. "Mind your own business," one of the teenagers retorted. "This is my business," the young man said, his voice firm. "She's not bothering anyone. Now get lost." The teenagers hesitated, sizing him up. He was taller than them, and his expression was resolute. They exchanged a look, then shrugged and walked away, muttering insults under their breath. The young man turned to Sophia, his expression concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sophia nodded, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "It's okay," he said. "Those guys are jerks. They're always causing trouble." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and concern. "You don't have anywhere to go, do you?" he asked. Sophia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes again. She felt a wave of shame, of humiliation. She was a burden, a problem, a source of trouble for everyone she encountered. The young man hesitated, then said, "Look, I can't offer you much, but you can stay here for a while, until you figure things out. My grandmother owns the bakery. She's not here right now, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind." Sophia looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she deserved. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you so much." It was a small act of kindness, a glimmer of hope in a world that had seemed so dark and unforgiving. But it was a start. It was a chance to breathe, to rest, to plan her next move. It was a lifeline, thrown to her when she was on the verge of drowning. The young man, whose name was Daniel, led Sophia to a small, cluttered room at the back of the bakery. It was used for storage, filled with sacks of flour, sugar, and other baking supplies. A narrow cot was tucked in one corner, covered with a faded quilt. "It's not much," Daniel said apologetically, "but it's better than sleeping on the street. My grandmother, Margaret, she's the owner. She's out delivering orders right now, but she should be back soon." Sophia looked around the room, her eyes taking in the details. It was small and dusty, but it felt safe, a refuge from the harsh realities of the outside world. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice sincere. This is more than I could have hoped for." Daniel smiled, a shy, awkward smile that made him look younger than his years. "Don't mention it," he said. "Just try to get some rest. You look exhausted." He left her alone, closing the door behind him. Sophia sank onto the cot, her body aching with fatigue. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the fear and uncertainty that still gnawed at her. She thought about her baby, about the life growing inside her. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling a faint flutter, a tiny movement that reminded her of the precious responsibility she carried. She drifted off to sleep, a fitful, restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams and anxieties. She was awakened by the sound of voices, the clatter of dishes, and the aroma of baking bread. She sat up, disoriented, her heart pounding. She had forgotten where she was, the events of the past few days a blur of fear and exhaustion. She heard a woman's voice, strong and assertive, but with an underlying kindness. It was Margaret, Daniel's grandmother. Sophia hesitated, unsure of what to do. She was afraid of Margaret's reaction, afraid of being rejected again. But she knew she couldn't stay hidden in the storage room forever. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. She opened the door and stepped out into the bakery. Margaret, a stout woman with graying hair pulled back in a bun and piercing blue eyes, was standing behind the counter, talking to Daniel. She turned as Sophia emerged, her eyes widening in surprise. Daniel quickly explained the situation, his voice low and earnest. "Grandma, this is Sophia. She needs a place to stay. I told her she could use the storage room for a while." Margaret looked at Sophia, her gaze scrutinizing, assessing. She saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the vulnerability in her posture, the slight swell of her belly. Her initial reaction was hesitation. She was a practical woman, not given to impulsive acts of charity. She ran a small business, struggling to make ends meet. She didn't have the resources to take in a homeless teenager, especially one who was pregnant. But there was something in Sophia's eyes, a quiet desperation, a flicker of resilience, that touched her heart. She saw a reflection of her own past struggles, her own youthful mistakes. Margaret had been a young, unwed mother herself many years ago. She knew the shame, the judgment, the hardship of facing the world alone. She had been fortunate to have had the support of her own mother, a woman who had stood by her through thick and thin. She couldn't turn Sophia away. She couldn't abandon her to the streets. "You can stay," Margaret said, her voice gruff but not unkind. "But you'll have to earn your keep. This isn't a charity, you know." Sophia's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I'll work hard. I promise." "We'll see about that," Margaret said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Now, come on. You look like you could use a good meal." She led Sophia to a small table in the corner of the bakery and placed a plate of warm bread, cheese, and fruit in front of her. It was the most delicious meal Sophia had ever tasted. As she ate, Margaret watched her expression softening. She saw the potential in this young girl, the strength that lay hidden beneath the fear and exhaustion. She saw a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she would do everything in her power to help Sophia, to give her a second chance, to provide the support and guidance that she herself had been so fortunate to receive. The bakery, a place of simple comfort and warmth, was about to become a sanctuary, a haven for a young girl and her unborn child. The next few days were a blur of activity for Sophia. Margaret, despite her initial gruffness, proved to be a surprisingly kind and patient teacher. She showed Sophia the basics of baking, measuring ingredients, kneading dough, operating the ovens. Sophia, eager to prove her worth, threw herself into the work. She was a quick learner, her nimble fingers adapting easily to the tasks. She found a strange satisfaction in the rhythm of the bakery, the repetitive motions, the tangible results of her labor. The work was physically demanding, especially in her condition, but it was also therapeutic. It kept her mind occupied, distracting her from the anxieties and uncertainties that still plagued her. Margaret watched Sophia closely, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She saw the girl's exhaustion, the occasional winces of pain, but also her determination, her unwavering commitment to earning her keep. She gradually began to open up to Sophia, sharing snippets of her own life story. She spoke of her own struggles as a young, single mother, the challenges she had faced, the prejudices she had overcome. "I wasn't much older than you when I had Daniel's father," Margaret confessed one afternoon, as they were kneading dough together. "It wasn't easy. People judged me, whispered behind my back, but I had my mother, and she helped me through it." Sophia listened intently, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She realized that Margaret's offer of help was not just an act of charity. It was an act of solidarity, of shared experience. Margaret, in turn, learned about Sophia's life, about her strict upbringing, her parents' rejection, and her desperate flight from home. She listened without judgment, offering words of comfort and encouragement. "You're strong, Sophia," Margaret said. "Stronger than you think. You've been through a lot, but you haven't given up. That's what matters." The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. It was a tentative bond, built on mutual respect, shared hardship, and a growing sense of trust. Margaret, however, was still cautious. She had offered Sophia temporary shelter, a place to rest and recover. But she hadn't made any long-term commitments. She was still unsure about the future, about the implications of taking in a pregnant teenager. One evening, after closing the bakery, Margaret sat down with Sophia at the small table in the back room. She had been thinking long and hard about Sophia's situation, and she knew she needed to address it directly. "Sophia," she began, her voice serious, "we need to talk about the future. You can't stay in this storage room forever. And you're going to need proper medical care, especially with the baby coming." Sophia nodded, her eyes filled with apprehension. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she dreaded it. She was afraid of being rejected again, of being forced back onto the streets. "I know," Sophia said softly. "I've been thinking about it too. I don't know what to do." Margaret sighed. She looked at Sophia, her gaze softening. She saw the fear, the uncertainty, but also the glimmer of hope that still flickered in her eyes. "I have an idea," Margaret said, her voice hesitant. "It's not ideal, but it's a possibility. There's a small apartment above the bakery. It's been empty for years, ever since my son moved out. It needs some work, but it's livable." Sophia's eyes widened. An apartment, her own place. It seemed too good to be true. I couldn't possibly," Sophia stammered. "I can't afford to pay rent." "I'm not asking you to pay rent," Margaret said. "Not yet, anyway. You can stay there, in exchange for helping me out at the bakery. And we'll figure things out. Together, Sophia's tears overflowed, tears of relief, gratitude, and a newfound hope. She couldn't believe Margaret's generosity, her willingness to take a chance on her. "Thank you, Margaret," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you so much. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Margaret said, a rare smile gracing her lips. "Just promise me you'll work hard, and you'll take care of that baby." "I promise," Sophia said, her voice firm. "I promise I will." It was a tentative offer, a fragile agreement, but it was a turning point. It was a step towards stability, towards a future that no longer seemed so bleak and uncertain. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with hope, resilience, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger. The apartment above the bakery was small and sparsely furnished, but to Sophia, it felt like a palace. It had a tiny living room, a bedroom just big enough for a bed and a dresser, a small kitchen, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub. The walls were faded, the floors creaked, and the windows rattled in the wind, but it was hers. It was a safe haven, a place where she could finally begin to build a life for herself and her baby. Margaret helped Sophia clean and furnish the apartment, providing her with basic necessities: a bed, linens, towels, dishes, and a few pots and pans. They scoured second-hand stores and yard sales, finding treasures amidst the cast-offs. Sophia, with a growing sense of nesting, carefully arranged the furniture, adding small touches to make the space feel like home. Life settled into a routine. Sophia woke early, helping Margaret prepare the bakery for the day. She learned to bake bread, rolls, pastries, and cakes, her hands becoming increasingly skilled and confident. She enjoyed the physicality of the work, the creative process, and the satisfaction of producing something tangible and delicious. Margaret, while still maintaining a gruff exterior, became a surrogate mother figure to Sophia. She taught her not only about baking but also about life. She shared her wisdom, her experiences, and her unwavering belief in Sophia's ability to overcome adversity. "You're stronger than you think, girl," Margaret would say, her voice firm but kind. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Sophia, in turn, brought a new energy to the bakery. She was cheerful, eager to learn, and her youthful enthusiasm was infectious. She interacted with the customers, her genuine warmth and kindness drawing them in. The regulars at the bakery, initially curious about Sophia's presence, gradually warmed to her. They saw her dedication, her hard work, and her growing baby bump. They began to offer her words of encouragement, small gifts for the baby, and even unsolicited advice on motherhood. The bakery became more than just a workplace. It became a community, a support system for Sophia. She found solace in the familiar routines, the comforting aromas, and the genuine connections she formed with the people around her. But the shadow of her past still lingered. She still had moments of fear, of doubt, of overwhelming anxiety. She worried about her parents, about whether they would ever accept her again. She worried about Mark, the baby's father, who had disappeared from her life as soon as she told him she was pregnant. She also worried about the future, about the challenges of raising a child on her own, with limited resources and no formal education. Margaret, sensing Sophia's anxieties, offered her unwavering support. "You're not alone, Sophia," she would say. "You have me, you have this community, and you have that precious baby growing inside you. That's all that matters." As the months passed, Sophia's belly grew larger, her pregnancy becoming increasingly visible. She felt the baby move, kick, and hiccup, each tiny movement a reminder of the life she was carrying, the responsibility she bore, and the love that was growing within her. The bakery, once a simple workplace, had become her sanctuary, her home, her family. It was a place where she found acceptance, support, and a glimmer of hope in a world that had once seemed so bleak and unforgiving. Despite the haven Sophia found within the bakery's walls and Margaret's gruff but loving presence, the outside world remained a source of anxiety. Havenwood was a small town, and word of the pregnant teenager living above the bakery spread quickly. While some residents were supportive, others were less charitable. Sophia often caught sideways glances, overheard whispers, and felt the sting of judgmental stares when she ventured out. Some people openly disapproved, their faces contorted in disgust or pity. Others were simply curious, their questions intrusive and insensitive. "So young to be having a baby?" one woman clucked at the grocery store, shaking her head disapprovingly. Where's the father? Another irresponsible teenager, I suppose. Sophia, her cheeks burning with shame, would try to ignore the comments, hurrying through her errands, her head down. She learned to avoid certain places, certain people, to minimize the risk of encountering negativity. Margaret, fiercely protective of Sophia, became her shield against the town's judgment. She would stand up to anyone who dared to speak ill of Sophia in her presence, her voice booming with righteous indignation. You mind your own business, she would bark at a gossiping neighbor. Sophia's a good girl, and she's doing the best she can. You do well to remember that before you open your mouth. But even Margaret's fierce defense couldn't completely protect Sophia from the hurt and humiliation. The constant scrutiny, the unspoken accusations, wore her down. One afternoon, Sophia was walking home from the library, carrying a stack of books on pregnancy and childcare, when a group of teenagers from her old school surrounded her. They were the same ones who had harassed her before, their faces twisted with malice. Look, it's the little slut, one of them sneered. Getting ready to pop, huh? They laughed cruelly, their words like daggers to Sophia's heart. She tried to walk past them, but they blocked her path. Where's your boyfriend, huh? Another one taunted. Ran away like the coward he is. Sophia felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness for her unborn child. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, but she knew it was useless. She was outnumbered, and any confrontation would only make things worse. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stood tall, her head held high, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Suddenly, a voice cut through the taunts. Leave her alone. It was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived across the street from the bakery. She was a quiet, unassuming woman, but her voice was firm and authoritative. The teenagers, surprised by her intervention, hesitated. Mrs. Henderson was a respected member of the community, and they knew they couldn't easily dismiss her. It's none of your business, old woman, one of them muttered. It is my business, Mrs. Henderson retorted. This girl is my neighbor, and I won't stand by and watch you bully her. Now get out of here before I call the police. The teenagers, realizing they were outnumbered and outmatched, reluctantly dispersed, grumbling under their breath. Mrs. Henderson turned to Sophia, her expression softening. Are you all right, dear? She asked. Sophia nodded, her voice choked with emotion. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, she whispered. Thank you so much. You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Henderson said. It's what any decent person would do. Those kids are just ignorant and cruel. Don't let them get to you. She walked Sophia back to the bakery, her presence a comforting shield. It was a small act of kindness, but it meant the world to Sophia. It was a reminder that not everyone in Havenwood was judgmental and unkind. The incident, while upsetting, also strengthened Sophia's resolve. She realized that she couldn't hide from the world, that she had to face the judgment and the prejudice head-on. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her child. She started attending a support group for young mothers, finding solace and camaraderie with other women who had faced similar challenges. She learned coping mechanisms, strategies for dealing with negativity, and the importance of self-care. She also began to stand up for herself, refusing to be silenced or shamed. She started to respond to the whispers and stares with a quiet dignity, her head held high, her eyes filled with a newfound confidence. She was a young mother, yes, but she was also a strong, resilient, and determined woman. She would not be defined by her past mistakes, nor would she allow the judgment of others to dictate her future. She would create her own path, a path of hope, resilience, and unwavering love for her child. As Sophia's pregnancy progressed, the physical and emotional demands intensified. The early months of nausea and fatigue gave way to backaches, swollen ankles, and shortness of breath. She found it increasingly difficult to keep up with the demands of the bakery, and Margaret, ever watchful, insisted she reduce her workload. You need to rest, Sophia, Margaret said firmly. You're carrying a child, not a sack of flour. I can manage the bakery just fine. Sophia, while grateful for Margaret's concern, was reluctant to slow down. She felt a strong need to contribute, to earn her keep, and to prove that she was not a burden. But Margaret was insistent, and Sophia eventually conceded. She reduced her hours at the bakery, focusing on lighter tasks like decorating cakes and taking customer orders. She spent more time resting, reading books on pregnancy and childcare, and preparing for the arrival of her baby. Despite the challenges, Sophia found a profound joy in her pregnancy. She loved feeling the baby move, kick, and grow inside her. She talked to her baby, sang to her baby, and dreamed of the day she would finally hold her child in her arms. She and Margaret chose a name for the baby, Anna. It was a simple, classic name, and it felt right. It was a name that represented hope, new beginnings, and the unwavering love that surrounded them. However, as Sophia entered her third trimester, complications arose. She began to experience severe swelling in her legs and ankles, her blood pressure spiked, and she developed gestational diabetes. Dr. Miller, the local physician who had taken over Sophia's prenatal care, was concerned. He explained that Sophia's age and her previous lack of prenatal care had increased her risk of complications. "We need to monitor you closely, Sophia," Dr. Miller said. "You're at risk for preeclampsia, which can be very dangerous for both you and the baby." Sophia was scared. She had heard of preeclampsia, a condition characterized by high blood pressure and protein in the urine, which could lead to seizures, stroke, and even death. She followed Dr. Miller's instructions meticulously, monitoring her blood pressure, eating a healthy diet, and attending regular checkups. But the fear lingered, a constant shadow over her pregnancy. Margaret, sensing Sophia's anxiety, did her best to reassure her. "You're strong, Sophia," she said. "You'll get through this, and I'll be here for you, every step of the way." One evening, Sophia experienced a sharp pain in her abdomen, followed by a gush of fluid. Her water had broken prematurely. She was terrified. Margaret, ever calm and collected in a crisis, immediately called Dr. Miller and then helped Sophia into the car. They rushed to the small, local hospital, the fear palpable in the silence between them. The labor was long and arduous. Sophia's small frame struggled to accommodate the birthing process, and the pain was intense. She clung to Margaret's hand, drawing strength from her unwavering presence. Dr. Miller and the nurses monitored Sophia and the baby closely, their faces etched with concern. The baby's heart rate began to drop, indicating fetal distress. Dr. Miller made the decision to perform an emergency C-section. Sophia, exhausted and overwhelmed, could only nod her agreement. She trusted Dr. Miller, and she knew he would do everything in his power to save her and her baby. As she was wheeled into the operating room, Sophia looked at Margaret, her eyes filled with fear and love. "Take care of Anna," she whispered. Margaret squeezed her hand, her own eyes filled with tears. "You'll be fine, Sophia," she said. "You're strong. You're a fighter. You'll both be fine." The surgery was a blur of bright lights, masked faces, and hushed voices. Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, her body numb from the anesthesia. She felt a tugging sensation, a strange pressure, and then she heard a cry, a weak but unmistakable cry. Her baby was born. Anna's arrival was both a joyous and a precarious event. Born prematurely, she was small and fragile, weighing just under 5 pounds. She was immediately placed in the neonatal intensive care unit NICU, where she was monitored around the clock by a team of doctors and nurses. Sophia, recovering from the C-section, was exhausted and weak, but her heart overflowed with love for her tiny daughter. She insisted on seeing Anna as soon as she was able, her body still aching from the surgery. She was wheeled into the NICU, her eyes immediately drawn to the incubator where Anna lay, surrounded by tubes and wires. The sight of her daughter, so small and vulnerable, brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "She's beautiful," Sophia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The nurse, a kind and compassionate woman named Lisa, smiled. "She is," she said, "and she's a fighter, just like her mom." Sophia spent hours each day in the NICU, sitting beside Anna's incubator, talking to her, singing to her, and simply watching her breathe. She learned how to change Anna's tiny diapers, how to feed her through a feeding tube, and how to hold her delicate body with the utmost care. Margaret was a constant presence, supporting both Sophia and Anna. She visited the hospital every day, bringing Sophia meals, clean clothes, and words of encouragement. She also helped care for Anna, learning the routines of the NICU alongside Sophia. The bond between Sophia and Margaret deepened during this time, forged in the crucible of shared anxiety, hope, and unwavering love. They were a family, bound together not by blood, but by circumstance and a deep, abiding affection. Ethan, who remained a steadfast source of strength, via phone calls and occasional, carefully managed visits due to his own anxieties about being in a hospital setting after the initial incident. Eagerly awaited the day he could hold his daughter. He sent pictures and updates to his family, who, while initially shocked, were now overwhelmingly supportive. Slowly but surely, Anna began to gain weight and strength. She graduated from the incubator to a bassinet, and then to a regular crib. She learned to suckle, to cry, and to grasp Sophia's finger with her tiny hand. The days turned into weeks, and finally, the day arrived when Anna was strong enough to go home. It was a day of immense joy and celebration, a triumph over adversity. Sophia and Margaret carefully packed Anna's belongings, a small collection of clothes, blankets, and toys that had been gifted to them by the hospital staff and the community. They thanked the doctors and nurses, their hearts filled with gratitude for the care they had received. As they left the hospital, carrying Anna in a car seat, Sophia felt a surge of emotion. They had arrived at the hospital as a scared, homeless teenager and a gruff, solitary baker. They were leaving as a family, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unexpected kindness of strangers. The apartment above the bakery felt even more like home now, filled with the sounds and smells of a newborn baby. Sophia and Margaret settled into a new routine, sharing the responsibilities of caring for Anna. They were exhausted, but they were also exhilarated. They had overcome so much, and they had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more deeply connected than ever before. The birth of Anna marked a new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with hope, challenges, and the unwavering love of a family forged in the fires of adversity. It was a chapter that would test their strength, but also reveal the profound beauty of human connection and the enduring power of the human spirit. Years passed, marked by the milestones of Anna's growth, her first smile, her first steps, her first words. Sophia, with Margaret's unwavering support, blossomed into a confident and capable young woman. She embraced motherhood with a fierce love and determination, providing Anna with a stable, nurturing, and joyful home. The apartment above the bakery remained their sanctuary, filled with the laughter of a child, the aroma of baking bread, and the comforting presence of Margaret. They were a family, unconventional perhaps, but bound together by a love that transcended blood ties. Sophia continued to work at the bakery, her skills honed by years of practice. She had become an integral part of the business, her creativity and dedication contributing to its success. She experimented with new recipes, developed new products, and charmed customers with her warm smile and genuine kindness. Margaret, while gradually relinquishing some of her responsibilities, remained the heart and soul of the bakery. She was Anna's doting grandma, showering her with affection, sharing stories, and teaching her the secrets of baking. Anna grew into a bright, curious, and compassionate child. She loved spending time in the bakery, watching her mother and grandmother work, helping with small tasks, and, of course, sampling the delicious treats. She was surrounded by love, laughter, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. Sophia, despite the challenges of her past, had managed to create a stable and fulfilling life for herself and her daughter. She had found a purpose, a community, and a sense of belonging. She had also reconnected with her parents, a tentative and fragile reconciliation. They had initially struggled to accept Sophia's choices, but Anna's arrival had softened their hearts. They had slowly, cautiously, begun to rebuild their relationship with their daughter and granddaughter. It was a process filled with awkward conversations, unspoken regrets, and the gradual rebuilding of trust. But Sophia was patient, understanding, and determined to forge a connection with her parents for Anna's sake. Mark, Anna's father, remained largely absent from their lives. He had sent occasional child support payments, but he had never expressed any interest in being a part of Anna's life. Sophia had accepted his absence, focusing her energy on creating a loving and supportive family with Margaret and Anna. As Anna grew older, Sophia explained her origins, sharing the story of her birth and the circumstances that had led to their unconventional family. She emphasized the love and support that had surrounded her, the kindness of strangers, and the unwavering bond she shared with Margaret. Anna, a wise and perceptive child, listened intently, her eyes filled with understanding. She embraced her unique family history, proud of her mother's strength and resilience, and grateful for the love that enveloped her. The bakery continued to thrive, becoming a beloved institution in Havenwood. It was more than just a place to buy bread and pastries. It was a gathering place, a community hub, a symbol of hope and resilience. Sophia, now in her early 20s, was a far cry from the scared, homeless teenager who had arrived at the bakery's doorstep years before. She was a confident, independent woman, a loving mother, and a successful businesswoman. She had overcome adversity, defied expectations, and built a life filled with purpose and meaning. As the years passed, Margaret's age began to catch up with her. Her once boundless energy diminished, her steps slowed, and her hands, once so adept at kneading dough, became gnarled with arthritis. She still insisted on helping out at the bakery, but Sophia gradually took over more and more of the responsibilities. Sophia, recognizing Margaret's declining health, encouraged her to rest, to enjoy her retirement, to finally put herself first. But Margaret, ever stubborn, resisted. The bakery was her life, her legacy, and she couldn't imagine spending her days doing anything else. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Sophia and Margaret were preparing for the annual Havenwood Harvest Festival, Margaret collapsed. Sophia, her heart pounding with fear, immediately called 911. Margaret was rushed to the hospital, the same hospital where Sophia had given birth to Anna years before. The doctors diagnosed a stroke, a serious but not immediately life-threatening event. Sophia stayed by Margaret's bedside, holding her hand, talking to her, praying for her recovery. Anna, now a bright and inquisitive 7-year-old, visited her grandma every day, bringing her drawings, flowers, and stories from school. Margaret, weakened but determined, slowly began to recover. She regained her speech, her mobility, and her sharp wit. But the stroke had taken its toll. She was no longer able to work at the bakery, and she needed constant care. Sophia, with the help of a home health aide, cared for Margaret in the apartment above the bakery. She adjusted her schedule, juggling her responsibilities at the bakery with her responsibilities as a caregiver. It was a challenging time, filled with emotional ups and downs, but Sophia faced it with the same resilience and determination that had characterized her entire life. One evening, as Sophia was sitting beside Margaret's bed, reading aloud from one of her favorite books, Margaret reached out and took her hand. "Sophia," she said, her voice weak but clear, "I'm not going to be around forever. I need you to promise me something." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She knew what was coming. "Anything, Margaret," she said. "Anything at all. Promise me you'll keep the bakery going," Margaret said. "It's more than just a business, Sophia. It's a part of this community. It's a place where people come together, where they find comfort, where they feel welcome." "I promise," Sophia said, her voice choked with emotion. "I promise I will. And promise me you'll pursue your dream," Margaret continued. "The one you always talked about, the one you put on hold for me and for Anna." Sophia remembered her dream, a dream she had almost forgotten. She had always wanted to open her own cafe, a place where she could combine her love of baking with her desire to create a warm and welcoming space for the community. "I promise," Sophia said again, her voice firmer this time. "I promise I will." A few weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the love of Sophia and Anna. Her death was a profound loss, not just for Sophia and Anna, but for the entire community of Havenwood. The funeral was well attended, a testament to Margaret's impact on the lives of so many people. Friends, neighbors, customers, and even Sophia's parents, now fully reconciled with their daughter, came to pay their respects. After Margaret's death, Sophia took over the bakery, fulfilling her promise to her beloved mentor and friend. She ran the bakery with the same dedication, passion, and kindness that Margaret had shown for so many years. But she also began to plan for her own dream, the dream she had put on hold for so long. She started saving money, researching locations, and developing a menu. She envisioned a cafe that would be more than just a place to eat. It would be a community gathering space, a place where people could connect, share stories, and feel a sense of belonging. It would be a tribute to Margaret, a testament to her legacy of kindness and generosity. Years later, Sophia's dream became a reality. She opened Sophia's Cafe, a warm and inviting space located just a few blocks from the original bakery. The cafe was bright and airy, with comfortable seating, local artwork adorning the walls, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filling the air. The menu featured a selection of Sophia's signature pastries, along with soups, salads, sandwiches, and other light fare. She used locally sourced ingredients whenever possible, supporting the farmers and producers in her community. The cafe quickly became a popular destination, attracting a diverse clientele of locals and visitors alike. It was a place where people could gather with friends, catch up on work, or simply relax and enjoy a delicious meal. Anna, now a teenager, worked at the cafe after school and on weekends. She was a bright, outgoing, and compassionate young woman, a reflection of her mother's strength and resilience. She loved interacting with the customers, learning about their lives, and sharing her own stories. Sophia's parents, now regular visitors to the cafe, were incredibly proud of their daughter and granddaughter. They had come to fully appreciate Sophia's strength, her determination, and her unwavering love for Anna. They had learned a valuable lesson about judging others, and they were grateful for the opportunity to rebuild their relationship with their family. The opening of Sophia's cafe was a full-circle moment for Sophia. It was a testament to her journey, her resilience, and her unwavering determination to overcome adversity. It was a tribute to Margaret, the woman who had taken her in, given her a chance, and shown her the true meaning of kindness and compassion. One evening, as Sophia was closing up the cafe, she looked around at the space she had created, her heart filled with gratitude. She thought about her past, about the scared, homeless teenager she had once been. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the obstacles she had overcome, and the love that had sustained her. She realized that her journey had not been in vain. It had shaped her, molded her, and made her the strong, independent woman she was today. It had taught her the importance of empathy, the power of community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As she locked the door and turned off the lights, she smiled. She had built a life she was proud of, a life filled with purpose, meaning, and love. She had found her place in the world, and she had created a space where others could find theirs as well. Sophia's cafe was more than just a business. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of kindness. It was a reminder that even from the darkest of circumstances, new beginnings could emerge, and that even the most broken lives could be mended with love, compassion, and a second chance. It was a testament to the enduring legacy of Margaret, the elderly baker, who had opened her heart and her home to a pregnant teenager in need, changing both of their lives forever. And, in its own way, the cafe served as a lesson to everyone in Havenwood and beyond about the dangers of judging a book by its cover, and the profound impact of a single act of kindness.